If you want to learn more about the topics of today's episode, visit the podcast website at naturesecretservice.com. Thanks for listening. Okay, people, listen up. Here we go. This is Nature's Secret Service, the podcast that puts you in the room with the men and women of wildlife law enforcement. I'm your host, Ed Newcomer. And last week, we talked with Mike Phillips, former head of wolf reintroduction in the greater Yellowstone area. We broke that conversation into two parts. And this week, we'll be rejoining that conversation with Mike to talk about everything from red wolves to Mexican gray wolves to the recent reintroduction of wolves in Colorado. Let's rejoin that conversation now. Welcome back, Mike. Thank you for being on two episodes of my podcast. We talked last time about your experience with reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone, but your reintroduction experience really goes back to the red wolves of the Southeastern US, which I think is a lot of people who are interested in wolves aren't very familiar with red wolves. Can you talk about red wolves and their biology compared a little bit to the gray wolves, and how did that reintroduction effort come about, and how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, you bet, Ed. Thank you. Red wolves technically are known as Canis rufus. Gray wolves technically are known as Canis lupus.
Right.
They're variations on this theme of a big canid running around the woods and being very, very social and living on things bigger than itself. You want to know a simple differentiation between wolves and coyotes. On average, wolves are hardwired to live on things bigger than themselves. It doesn't mean that a wolf on occasion won't kill a rabbit, but they are living on things bigger than themselves, deer and elk, for example. In contrast, coyotes typically are hardwired to live on things smaller than themselves. Doesn't mean that a coyote won't kill a deer on occasion. It does mean that their food habits drift in the direction of things that are smaller. Okay. Red wolves were the wolf of the southeastern United States. They go way back in time. They are simply the wolf of the southeast. They're a little bit smaller. A male red wolf ought to weigh 60 to 70 pounds. Females got to weigh 50 to 60. And their genetic makeup is very, very similar to gray wolves. They are social, but in the southeast, you could expect pack size to be probably 4 or 5 or 6. And when you push into the gray wolf country, northern Minnesota and beyond, you're looking at pack size that's going to be 6, 7, 8 or more.
Right.
So red wolves are, the wolf of the southeast. Otherwise, very, very similar in terms of the ecology. They make extensive use of white-tailed deer. They make extensive use of raccoons and rabbits. They were reintroduced to the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge back in the mid-1980s. I was blessed to run that project as all part of a recovery program. The program said we need some red wolves in captivity to ensure the persistence of the species. The red wolf was declared extinct in the wild, I want to say in the early 1980s.
Okay.
And before the extinction was claimed, some friends of mine went out and captured the last few free-ranging red wolves in Texas and Louisiana, and they established a captive breeding program. And so we have these good red wolves in captivity that need to be released to the wild. The Endangered Species Act is all about establishing wild populations. Animals in captivity can be a great assist, but the benchmark of success for the Endangered Species Act is free-ranging animals that can be fairly considered wild. So the reintroductions.
I was going to say, fun connection between me and red wolves here is that I didn't know anything about red wolves until I was in law school, actually. And I went to law school in Tacoma, Washington, and there's a zoo there called the Point Defiance Zoo. And when I didn't want to study, I would go out to the Point Defiance Zoo and I would walk around. And I was very interested to know and find out that they were part of the red wolf breeding program. They had red wolves there.
Ed, they were more than part. Point Defiance is where the red wolf captive breeding program started.
No kidding.
They have been the anchor and are due a world of credit for that work.
Isn't that neat?
The releases in northeastern North Carolina, centered on the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge, were all about establishing a population in the wild that would count toward federal recovery.
Got it.
Okay, now hold that thought.
And also, can I back you up a little bit? What was the historic range of the red wolf?
Oh, it drifted into south central Texas and then all the way across to Florida, and it pushed up to Pennsylvania and drifted as far west as Idaho. Imagine the southeastern quadrant of the United States, and that could be considered red wolf country.
Okay. So they ranged quite a bit.
So here's where red wolves and gray wolves differ a bit. Yeah. And it is the big problem for recovery. Red wolves have this odd predilection. When they occur in the wild in small numbers, they have this odd predilection to hybridize with coyotes.
Oh, boy. That's a problem.
And it may be no more complicated than the fact that wolves everywhere are monestrous. Females cycle once a year. That's a fundamental difference. Wild wolves and domestic dogs. A domestic dog will cycle about every 9 months.
Okay.
Or less. Gray wolves, it's an annual cycle, both males and females.
Okay.
So let's assume, pal, you get the chance to breed once a year. You're not going to miss the opportunity, man. Right. And if you're wandering around, you're a 3-year-old male red wolf, and you're ready to go, and you can't find one of your kind, but you think, oh, that coyote, she's not bad looking. That'll work. And it's kind of that Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young tune. If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. Red wolves and coyotes have come together and hybridized. There's been integration. Okay. As far as nature's concerned, she thinks this is great. 2 species coming together. This is especially common in the plant world. 2 species coming together to give rise to a third form is a common mechanism of speciation, especially in the plant world. So you take a male red wolf and a female coyote, and they breed, and she has a litter of puppies. They're strong, vigorous, viable animals.
Sure.
Beautiful. Nature celebrates that. Those animals don't count under the Endangered Species Act. Because for the Endangered Species Act, what matters above all else, what is the listed entity? What is the entity considered for protection under the law? Specifically, when you look at the listing for the red wolf, it is Canis rufus. It is not Canis rufus crossed with a coyote.
Right.
So you've got this problem of hybridization. You have this problem of integration.
And I take it the northern gray wolves don't interbreed with coyotes?
No, not with the same degree of regularity. And we can talk about that. But no, they breed more true. You could fully expect gray wolves in Minnesota and coyotes in Minnesota to use the same country, and you're not seeing a bunch of hybrid litters.
Okay.
Matter of fact, in that same country, what tends to happen is the gray wolves kill the coyotes.
Yeah, that's Yellowstone too, right?
So, and this may be a function of small numbers of red wolves, but regardless, when we began the work in northeastern North Carolina, the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge, it was seen as a highly suitable site because it was free of coyotes.
Okay.
And so off we went with reintroductions, and we had some success with about 100 wolves out. By about that time, I began that work I think I moved to Manio, North Carolina in 1985. And I left for Yellowstone in about a decade later to run the Yellowstone Project. And as I was leaving North Carolina, leaving the Red Wolf Project, we had about 100 animals on the ground and things were going swimmingly. And then one thing happened. Within about a year or two before I left, we bumped into this litter of puppies that we couldn't explain. We knew that they were associated with the little female coyote that we knew about, but we didn't know who her mate was, and she was in bad shape because of mange. We bumped into the puppies. They were in bad shape because of mange. Mm-hmm. And so we brought the puppies into captivity. We had a site on the refuge that we could properly care for canids in captivity, and we cleaned them up, and we said, well, let's see what they look like when they're 18 months of age, when they're truly adult size. And one grew up to look like a good red wolf, and one grew up to look like a good coyote, and there was one right in the middle.
Okay.
And so we were beginning to see this problem of integration surface in northeastern North Carolina as I was leaving for Yellowstone. That problem has persisted. It was combined with a profound problem of poaching.
Okay.
And I will say something about the Department of Justice here in a moment.
Sure.
But between excessive human-caused mortality, shooting red wolves, and hybridization with coyotes, the program did a nosedive. And here we are, 2026. Let's say I began that work in 1986. 40 years later, Ed, the red wolf is in worse shape, in my mind, than what it was when I showed up in Manual in 1986. Because at least in 86, we had reason to be hopeful. I don't know that we have reason to be hopeful for the red wolf in 2026 if we're thinking about areas where coyotes occur.
Yeah.
When you look at the United States,
That's
you're
everywhere.
hard-pressed to find a place where there aren't any coyotes.
Yeah, they're in Los Angeles, right here in my neighborhood.
So here's my punchline on the red wolf program. I hold the species in high regard. I know a lot about it. I was proud to be a member of that team for a period of time working for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. But as an objective biologist and someone that has served in public office, and I know that the citizens, the voters of this country deserve that we be honest with them, I am willing to admit, for the red wolf, it might simply be an expression of the children's tale. Despite all the king's horses and all the king's men, sometimes you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And that there are other species, Ed, that probably are not recoverable in today's landscapes. I fail to see how in the world you're going to recover key deer in Florida.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of work with Oplomato falcons in the Southwest. It may be another species that is simply not recoverable in a manner that fits the spirit and intent of the Endangered Species Act. That is a thumbnail sketch of the red wolf program. I am concerned for it, and I just fail to see how, given this persistent predilection to hybridize with coyotes, I don't see how you build the red wolf a future that would comport with the future demanded by the Endangered Species Act.
So between this hybridization issue and similar to the northern gray wolves, these are not liked animals, and there's a lot of poaching, I take it. So between those two...
Well, I see, and it was bullshit poaching. It's bullshit poaching in a handful of counties in northeastern North Carolina. North Carolina said, oh, shit, man, we ought to shoot canids at night. And the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission said, sure, go shoot them at night. So now they're unloading on coyotes at night. Well, doggone it, Ed, if you and I were in the woods in northeastern North Carolina, and we look down that logging road and we say, shit, man, look at that. There's a canid. What is that, man? Is that a coyote or is that a 6-month-old red wolf? What the fuck is that? Okay. In this country, and you know this as a special agent, let's hope your listeners know it too.
They will by the time this episode comes out, yes.
In this country, it is expected. It's a critical component of the fair chase philosophy, and it undergirds all of our laws concerning wildlife use. You cannot pull the trigger unless you know unequivocally what it is you're shooting. You can't go to court and say, gee whiz, Your Honor, I'm so sorry. I thought that eagle was a crow.
Exactly.
That ain't good enough. Mistaken identity is not a defense. What the Department of Justice did was they didn't press these cases. They didn't say, I don't give a shit that you thought that was a coyote. You shot a red wolf. That's against the law. That's not incidental take because you purposely pulled the trigger. Here's incidental take, as special agents like you described to me. Here's an incidental take of a red wolf that would not get you busted. You shoot a white-tailed deer lawfully. The bullet passes through the deer, travels down the road, hits the wolf in the head and kills it. That's an incidental take.
Yep.
That's not what was happening at night with spotlights, ostensibly because they thought they needed to kill coyotes. So it was ridiculous, once again, needless killing. And in this particular case, I think for an extended period of time, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service special agents were not good enough at convincing the Department of Justice to pursue these cases in a court of law.
Well, I'll tell you what. The reason for that, it comes out of McKittrick.
That's exactly right. You go there, I'll go there too. So,
hey, by this time, my listeners know what the McKittrick policy is at DOJ. We are dissecting that hard during this season because it is a wrong decision.
And you know, here's the irony, Ed. If you're a waterfowl hunter, and I'm not, I don't hunt waterfowl, but
I don't either.
understand the process well enough. I get it. We expect waterfowl hunters to make fine distinctions on the wing.
On the wing.
You have to be able to tell a canvasback from a similar species, and if you can't, and you take one unlawfully, it doesn't matter that you didn't properly ID that bird on the wing. You broke the law. 100%. And a CO would press that case.
Yep, conservation officer would definitely press that case.
And that case would almost surely succeed in court with some sort of fine.
You bet.
Contrast, because of the Chad McKittrick claiming that, number 10 I thought it was a dog, and DOJ was somehow impressed by that bullshit claim of mistaken identity. If you don't know in the country, folks, don't pull the trigger.
Don't pull the trigger. And that is common knowledge among all hunters or anybody who handles firearms. You are responsible for where that bullet goes,
That's
period.
Exactly right.
100%. And
so
that's
the red wolf. I don't see how you get from where you are to where you need to be, pal.
I suspected. And, one thing that kind of cued me in that was probably the fate is that when I reached out to some agents who used to work in the Southeast and asked them to come on to talk about the enforcement issues related to red wolves, I couldn't get anybody to agree because one of the answers I got was, I don't want to go on and give anybody any ideas about how they could kill one more red wolf. I'm like, well, that's depressing as hell.
Well, right now, I agree, and maybe I shouldn't have said anything.
No, I mean, the bottom line, Mike, is that people who are out to kill red wolves, they know very well what the McKittrick memo says, and they know very well what to say if they get caught, and they're very savvy. We're not going to give anybody any ideas about it because they already know exactly how they're going to go poach.
Yeah, and so folks know there's maybe 10 or 20 red wolves. 10 or 20 red wolves that are free ranging at the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. And that's an interesting number for those 10 or 20. They get to live lives of freedom. But
sure.
That in no mean constitutes a population, and certainly you're a long, long ways from recovery. We're 40 years in. Yeah. I am less optimistic for the red wolf now than I was 40 years ago. Beyond the problem of illegal killing, you have this background concern of hybridization with coyotes.
Yeah, interesting. Well, on that sad note, let's turn to the Mexican gray wolves. Those are, of course, in the southeastern U.S., in Mexico now, but also in Arizona and New Mexico. What's your involvement with the Mexican gray wolf recovery projects?
Yeah, so folks know red wolf, Canis rufus, gray wolf, Canis lupus, and the Mexican gray wolf is Canis lupus, and there's lots of subspecies of Canis lupus. You could make a case that the gray wolves in Yellowstone are best considered Canis lupus erymotus. The gray wolves of Minnesota are best considered Canis lupus nubilis. The Mexican gray wolf is best considered Canis lupus bailey.
Okay.
From a taxonomic perspective, I'm a lumper. I'm not a splitter. As far as I'm concerned, it's Canis lupus irregardless. But nonetheless,
I love it.
The Mexican wolf is a listed entity. It's considered by federal law under the Endangered Species Act. And so Canis lupus bailey is a name that has standing under federal law. I have been a member of every Mexican wolf recovery team that's been convened since 1995. I know the science and the mechanics and the philosophy that undergirds Mexican gray wolf recovery very, very well. Since 1998, my shop, the Turner Endangered Species Fund, has maintained the only private captive breeding and pre-release facility for Mexican wolves in the world. At Mr. Turner's Ladder Ranch, we have housed well over 100 animals at that facility over the last, 1998? Over the last nearly 30 years. We've had large numbers of puppies born there. We've had animals that come from wherever to our place to go to Mexico. We're an important stop on the way to Mexico. So I've been deeply, deeply involved in the Mexican wolf recovery program since 1995. I know the program very, very well. And I am willing to debate anybody, anytime, any place. The Mexican Wolf Recovery Program, the Mexican Wolf Recovery Plan, as currently constituted, will fail.
Will fail. That's interesting because it's not doing as well as the Yellowstone release or the Northern Rockies releases, but. Because, those wolves are now into California. They've dispersed as far as California. Why? Why isn't the Mexican gray wolf recovery program doing as well?
the habitat of the Southwest is not as accommodating as the habitats further north into Montana and Oregon and Idaho and Washington.
Meaning what? Not as much prey or what?
The prey biomass is not quite the same. There's not the big, massive tracts of public land where any gray wolf would receive reasonable consideration. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service, in what I would argue, and I'll debate anybody, anytime, anywhere, on this particular point, they have adopted this wrong-headed approach of retrieving a Mexican gray wolf just because it wanders a certain distance to the north.
Yeah.
If a Mexican gray wolf wanders north of Interstate 40, the Fish and Wildlife Service is inclined to catch it and bring it back south of I-40, even though the animal hasn't caused any problem except standing on a piece of ground north of I-40. So,
and now, honestly, the prey base north of 40 is probably better than it is south.
Well, it certainly gets better.
Yeah.
And I have to believe that wolves are sometimes motivated by food, but regardless of why she's north of I-40, if she's north of I-40 but not causing any problem, why would we monkey with her? Here's a good way to look at it. We don't manage common species that way. We don't say cottontail rabbits are okay until they cross this line, and then we're going to go get them and do something with them. It's a wrong-headed way to look at wildlife management and wildlife restoration. But here's why it exists.
Okay. And also, when you explain this, because earlier you were talking about in the earlier parts of the northern gray wolf reintroduction, you kind of took an intensive management approach. So why wouldn't you do that with the Mexican wolves?
Well, the Fish and Wildlife Service has intensively managed Mexican gray wolves, and they have done so successfully. And you might think, well, gee whiz, Mike, why is it failing?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a long story, but let me see if I can do it rather quickly. For many, many years, me and my colleagues were the science voice for the Mexican wolf recovery program and for the Mexican wolf recovery planning process.
Okay.
And so we took a deep dive into a simple question. Where could gray wolves successfully go in the southwestern United States? We did a study of habitat suitability.
Okay.
Now, gee whiz, holy mackerel. Western Colorado, highly suitable. Northern Arizona, southeastern Utah, highly suitable. And the country in southwestern New Mexico and southeastern Arizona, just north of the border, highly suitable too. You got these three big banks of opportunity in southwestern New Mexico, southeastern Arizona. That's the southern part. Your northwestern part is the Grand Canyon ecoregion of Arizona and Utah. And your northeastern part of this, say, triangle is the Southern Rockies ecoregion of southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. And when you look at habitat suitability and you look at things like road density, you think, wow, this is a winner. This could work really well. It would start to look a lot like the Northern Rocky Mountains, where you had three populations that had to communicate, one in Idaho, one in Montana, one in Yellowstone. Same idea in the Southwest. It would work beautifully.
Yeah.
Would have worked beautifully. The states didn't like that at all. The states of Wyoming, the states of Colorado and Utah and Arizona and New Mexico said bullshit to that idea, bullshit. And they kept getting in the way, they kept getting in the way, they kept getting in the way for a long period of time. I'm telling you what, at years. We began this work in 1995. And by 2014, nearly 20 years later, the states had convinced the feds to discard the notion of moving Mexican wolves into the Grand Canyon ecoregion and the Southern Rockies ecoregion. They said the northern option's ridiculous. You shouldn't do that. Here's what you should do instead. The southern option. Mexican wolf recovery should focus on central Arizona and central New Mexico, south into Mexico. And they were able to convince the United States Fish and Wildlife Service of that southern option for a 10-year period of time that started at the beginning of 2018. So the feds are committed to this southern option at least until probably 2028 or 2029.
Okay.
It will not work.
Right.
And here's why it will not work. It says You need about 300 wolves in the United States, part of that southern option, for 8 years, and you need about 200 Mexican wolves in Mexico in the southern portion of that southern option for about 8 years. There's not a snowball's chance in hell, Ed, that you're going to establish a population of 200 wolves in Mexico for 8 successive years. It ain't going to happen. And here's why it won't happen. There's virtually no public land in Mexico. It's all privately owned or owned by communities known as ejidos. But it's still private property. They have our Mexican colleagues, beautiful biologists, I think the world of them, but they don't have a reliable sense of the distribution of native prey.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that there's not that much in the form of white-tailed deer in Mexico, and there's no elk. And finally, they don't have any way to contradict a simple claim. There's livestock everywhere.
Yeah.
Livestock everywhere. So here's a piece of ground, no public land, unknown numbers of native prey, but they're scarce, and livestock everywhere. That is a tremendous formula for conflict.
Yep.
And yet the Fed said, nope, we're going to insist that about 40% of the work that needs to be done to recover the Mexican wolf has to be done in Mexico. Ed, it will not work. Now, you might ask, why did the Feds buy into this?
Yeah, why did they?
Some really talented biologists in Mexico and the United States came together and they did a habitat suitability study.
Okay.
And so they built this model, this black box that said, if we put the right stuff into the black box, that is this habitat model, it'll spit out answers as to where good habitat exists.
I see.
Cool, got it. We did the same thing when we looked at the Grand Canyon ecoregion and the Southern Rockies ecoregion. We did the same thing. But here's what they didn't do with their black box. They left out two very important data layers that have great influence over habitat suitability for wolves. They did not include a layer for land ownership.
Oh.
In the United States, wolf recovery has been advanced across large tracts of federal lands, not private lands.
Right.
And Mexico is nearly all privately owned. They had no component in their habitat model for land ownership. And then secondly, they had no component in their habitat model for the distribution and abundance of livestock.
Right.
And yet, a consistent point of friction between humans and wolves is conflict with livestock. Everywhere in the United States where wolf recovery has advanced, it's been across large tracts of federal public lands.
Open land, yeah.
That support a great deal more native prey, deer and elk, than livestock.
Yeah.
Those two are essential aspects of habitat suitability for gray wolves. In this habitat suitability model for Mexico, they left them out.
Yeah.
And then finally, the third piece that matters. In the United States, wolf recovery has gone forward because of large tracts of federal public land, good numbers of native prey compared to livestock, and a federal law, the Endangered Species Act, that mandates recovery. The Secretary shall advance recovery. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what the law says. Recovery for the Secretary of the Interior is not a discretionary activity. In contrast, in Mexico, their equivalent of our Endangered Species Act simply says recovery would be fine, but it's not mandated. So there is no force of mandate pushing the program forward. And as it turns out, Ed, you know this, pal, as a special agent, the United States government has no statutory authority in Mexico.
Right.
It's a foreign country. It's absolutely shocking. Okay, finally, the fourth piece. No public land, unknown numbers of native prey. You got livestock everywhere. You've got no mandate. The fifth piece, here's the fifth piece. This is a real winner. You're going to love this one. As a special, you're going to love this. The fifth piece, the fifth nail in the coffin, if you will. Some of the best country in Mexico, the big wild country, is controlled by cartels.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
You can't work with some sense that you are secure from violence. I've had teammates that have gone into Mexico on behalf of our Bolson Tortoise project that have been stopped at night on a rural road by armed banditos.
Yeah.
Nothing came of it, but it could have. I even had one of my colleagues works for Arizona Game and Fish, and he said, "This is great. Well, all that wild country is controlled by cartels." And I said, "Jim, you're telling me that this is good habitat for gray wolves because of the drug trade? How in the world does that work, man?
That's not a stakeholder you're gonna win.
This is crazy, man. This is crazy." And the sixth piece.
There's another piece.
I'll debate anybody, anytime, anywhere. The final piece, the final nail in the coffin. When you look at wolf population establishment via reintroductions, and this goes back to what I said about Yellowstone and the red wolf work, there is at the beginning an intense period, a period of very intense field work.
Yeah.
To promote population growth and to prevent and resolve conflicts, you've got to be able to work with wolves on the ground. Ed, if Mexico's all privately owned, who am I supposed to talk to get the key to get through that gate?
Yeah, you won't.
And that's assuming that the guy that owns the gate, that owns the land, is going to give me the key to get through. How do I put my boots on the ground with enough regularity to do the management that is needed to promote population growth? There's not a snowball's chance in hell that Mexico's going to work.
No, and you know what else? I mean, if you even back up to the 95 time in the Idaho-Montana area, our agents had some trouble with some early investigations because they were running into armed anti-government militia-type people who hated the government. And that's going to be 100-fold down there in Mexico.
It's not going to work. It's not. Here was the last piece of what I consider the sad tragedy of the Mexican wolf through a wrong-headed recovery planning process.
Okay.
By 2017, the service had cemented the southern option, advancing Mexican wolf recovery from central Arizona and central New Mexico, south into Mexico, walking away from the northern option, which would have been to move Mexican wolves into the Grand Canyon ecoregion of Arizona and Utah and the southern Rockies ecoregion of northern New Mexico and southern Colorado.
Yeah, arguably better habitat,
When they made that, I said, okay, fine. I've done my best, assembled the best available science, and it is the service's responsibility and opportunity to decide the direction of a recovery program. You've cast your fly. I'm with you. I'm going to move on the southern Rockies. I'm going to move on wolf recovery to western Colorado otherwise. And once I succeed, that great, big, wonderful patch of habitat that is western Colorado, that is God's gift to gray wolves, once that patch of habitat, which is currently unoccupied, once it's occupied by northern gray wolves, it will be lost to the Mexican wolf. Because any Mexican wolf that wanders into that country, into western Colorado that now supports 125 gray wolves from Montana, let's say, a Mexican wolf wanders into that country, it's simply going to be lost in the genetic shuffle of breeding.
Yeah, right.
And so you've set your course on the southern option. I tried for over 20 years to get you to recognize the value of the northern option. You haven't done it. And that's when Team Turner launched the massive effort to secure a mandate for restoring a population to western Colorado that would almost surely, and now we know for sure does, focuses on a northern type. Animals coming out of Oregon or Washington or Montana, not Mexican wolves coming out of captivity.
Right. Which is a perfect transition to now talk about the Colorado situation. The only thing I will add here is that it sounds like the Mexican gray wolf effort could be successful if those areas had been opened up sooner, or if they were opened up to Mexican gray wolves, allowed them to migrate up there on their own.
Well, you reintroduce them.
Yeah, or you reintroduce them before the Colorado wolves, which are northern gray wolves, take.
And for 20 years, that was my play. I kept saying the best way to populate Colorado with wolves and the Grand Canyon ecoregion of Arizona and Utah would be the United States Fish and Wildlife Service discharging their duties under the Endangered Species Act on behalf of Canis lupus bailey. That was the 20-year play. The feds chose otherwise. I will say there is a Hail Mary for the Mexican wolf. It doesn't touch on northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. That country, I think, it's lost to bailey now. Here's the Hail Mary for bailey. The Hail Mary is the Grand Canyon ecoregion of northern Arizona and southern Utah. That is still unoccupied. It is ideally suited for the Mexican gray wolf. If the feds could start to ignore that I-40 boundary, that makes no sense anyway. If the feds were to move reintroductions to the Grand Canyon National Park, for example, the feds could claim the wonderful patch of habitat that is the Grand Canyon ecoregion. They could claim that for Bailey, and it is good enough, Ed. I bet you a nickel I could run the science that would say I can have a big enough Mexican wolf population in the Grand Canyon ecoregion and a big enough Mexican wolf population down in southwestern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico and southeastern Arizona, the border country. Between those two areas, I would have enough Mexican wolves in the U.S. to satisfy the recovery plan.
To recover.
Yeah, the Grand Canyon ecoregion is still open to Bailey, and it would represent a Hail Mary.
Interesting. Okay. Well, hopefully somebody from the right people that are listening.
Feds aren't thinking about it, not in any functional way. The state of Arizona is keenly opposed to the idea. The state of Utah is keenly opposed to the idea. I say to people that are impressed by keen opposition by state agencies, if it took state support for the Fish and Wildlife Service to advance wolf recovery, I would still be sitting on a dock in Manteo, North Carolina, waiting to let the first red wolf go.
Yes, you would. There's no question about that, for sure. So now, perfect transition to talk about Colorado, because Colorado reintroduction is recent, and you played a major role in that. Can you explain how the Colorado reintroduction is very different from what happened up in Yellowstone?
Oh, well, the mechanics are very similar to what happened in Idaho.
Mechanics, but the politics of it and the way it came about, right?
Yeah, and of course, folks, all of the wolf reintroductions that have been done to date, except in Colorado, were done by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service under their authorities by the Endangered Species Act. When the Fish and Wildlife Service decided to push the Mexican wolf south, the agency was gone. They weren't interested in Colorado, so I said to myself, okay, how else are we going to get this done? I knew I could have done it illegally. Shoot, Ed, you and I could catch enough wolves in Montana and drag them down to Colorado and go and get the job done.
Well, hey, and we got to stop there, because wolves were coming down from Wyoming into Colorado. Every once in a while there'd be wolves turning up.
When I knew the Mexican wolf was not going to be viable for Colorado, I thought, well, we knew it illegally, but I didn't want to go to jail, so we set the illegal idea aside. You could imagine gray wolves doing it on their own, but Wyoming passed a law that basically said the gray wolf is vermin across about 85% of the state. And so consequently, any wolf that wants to leave the northwestern corner of Wyoming has to walk through this extensive killing field to get to Colorado. When you take a look at the science of connectivity, there's just very, very little chance that enough gray wolves would make that walk to actually give rise to a population. So let's set aside colonization by wolves moving on their own. So you're not going to do it illegally. Wolves aren't going to do it on their own. Feds aren't coming with the Mexican wolf. We had a fourth option. There's one last option, and it speaks to the common sense aspect of the Endangered Species Act, which simply states that when a state government is inclined to discharge the duties of the Endangered Species Act, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service will enable that. Okay. And there's a lot to be said for the states rising up and taking care of imperiled species. So I thought, the gray wolf is protected under federal law, but if the state of Colorado is willing to stand up and say, hey, we'll do the hard work, I could fully expect the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to say, hey, thank you. For God's sakes, we appreciate that you're going to carry the water now. Here's the permit. Off you go. Okay.
Right.
But the fact is, Ed, wolf recovery is so hard, no state is going to willingly jump into the deep end of the wolf recovery pool. You got to push them.
Okay.
And you say to yourself, well, how can you push a state government into the deep end of the pool? Well, you know how you do that, Ed? You get the voters to rise up and say, do this. You get the real bosses to say to their employees, like a governor and like a director of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, ye shall use reintroductions to restore a self-sustaining population of gray wolves to western Colorado. So I built out, over the course of many, 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 many years, I built out a plan to exercise direct democracy as the means for securing a lawful mandate to use reintroductions to restore gray wolves to western Colorado. We pushed that across many years. It was ultimately decided in November of 2020 when the voters of Colorado had in front of them Proposition 114. And Proposition 114 was simple. It basically said, if you aspire for the state of Colorado to remain wolfless, vote no on 114. If you aspire for the state of Colorado to support gray wolves, vote yes. A majority of the voters in November 2020 voted yes. And that fixed Proposition 114 as now a state law. It is Colorado Revised Statute 33-2-105.8. Call it the Wolf Restoration Law. And it says Colorado Parks and Wildlife, under the authority of the Wildlife Commission, will use reintroductions to restore a population that is self-sustaining to western Colorado. Once that became law, the feds did exactly what we'd expect the feds to do. They worked with the state to make sure the administrative process was lawful. They issued a permit. The first reintroductions began in December of 2023. Right now in Colorado, there are probably 30 adult sized gray wolves in the state. I would guess those 30 are probably distributed into 3 or 4 or 5 packs, families that are capable of breeding. If I'm right, there's about 30 adults on the ground in Colorado, given that we're almost into May. There's a bunch of puppies that have probably been born. There might be another 15 or 20 puppies on the ground. You might have 50 or 55 gray wolves on the ground in Colorado as we speak as a consequence of the successful exercise of direct democracy to establish a restoration mandate.
What do you think? Sometimes the Fish and Wildlife Service would come under criticism there would be a call for the Fish and Wildlife Service to make its decisions based on science, not politics, right? So what's the difference? And now Colorado is bringing back wolves based on, arguably, some people will say politics. All the liberals in Colorado wanted wolves and pushed them on everybody else. That's not relying on science. That's relying on politics. What's the response to that?
Well, first and foremost, life is politics, Ed. You know that, right? and we should all admit that none of this takes place, especially the endangered species work that we've talked about. None of it takes place without the Endangered Species Act. It's a law. It's a law that came about because of a political process. Ed, you and I both know there is no fish and wildlife management in the United States absent laws that are a consequence of politics. This is all nested against politics. Politics are a way for a great nation like ours to move forward together. It doesn't mean that everybody's satisfied, but if somebody can come up with a better system than what we've got, it may be a shitty system. I just believe it's the best in the world. So,
I agree.
Cry me a river that, oh my Lord, ballot box biology bullshit. And now, on a more technical note, and I'll debate this anytime, anywhere, anybody, the notion of a ballot box biology being exercised in Colorado. When you take a fair look at Proposition 114, it was really largely silent on technical aspects of restoration via reintroductions. It did say things like ranchers will be respected. It did say things like you're going to use reintroductions. It did say reintroductions have to be done west of the Continental Divide. But, shit, man, Colorado's huge west of the Continental Divide.
Sure.
And it said the commission has to develop criteria for success.
Okay.
But beyond those 4 general points, the specifics of how to get from where we were to where the law said you needed to be, those were all left up to the state game agency to deal with the technical aspects. I believe if you take a fair look at Proposition 114, it is a nice blending of the expectation that technical experts, biologists, would decide on technical matters related to wolf restoration via reintroduction. So it's a nice embrace of science and technical expertise. At the same time, it's a nice embrace of a decided slice of Americana. That slice being the power of electoral politics. One person, one vote, we come together, we make a decision, and off we go. It's a nice blending. Now, beyond that, people say, well, it's still ballot box biology. I would say to them, beyond that, Colorado Revised Statute 33-2-105.5. It was passed years earlier that says, well, gee whiz, Ed, any reintroduction of a federally listed species, either threatened or endangered, under the Endangered Species Act, any reintroduction of a federally listed species in Colorado has to first be approved by the state legislature. Okay. Wait a minute. Everybody that sits in the state legislature is elected against a ballot.
Right.
And very few biologists serve in state legislatures. So I could make the case that, hang on, 33-2-105.5 ensured that endangered species work in Colorado involving federally listed species and reintroductions are all done at the ballot box.
Right.
They're all decided by elected officials.
There you go.
I will debate anybody, anytime, anywhere on the wisdom of Proposition 114 as a way to move the notion of wolf restoration in Colorado to a decision point. Coloradans could have said in the majority, no.
True.
Got it. They didn't say that, Ed. They said yes in the majority.
That's true. And, all those people that, I don't even want to bring this up because it's not even worth responding to. So don't respond, but I'm going to mention it anyway. You always see on Facebook, all the people claiming, well, why don't you put the wolves in Denver? That's such a cliche, stupid thing to say. But don't even answer. It's just such a stupid thing to say. I don't think we need to respond to it.
Now, wait a minute. You want us to move against the best available science. We understand gray wolves well. The habitat of Denver is not suitable.
It's not
too many
suitable.
Roads, too many people, not enough prey. That's what. I mean, fuck.
I know it's such a cliche, stupid thing to say. It doesn't make any sense. But on that note, why? And I know you're running out of time here, but why? What is it about Colorado that makes it a suitable place to expect success in reintroducing wolves?
So I said earlier, it's probably God's gift to gray wolves. It is, forget for a moment that there might be 30 adult-sized wolves on the ground in Colorado and 10, 15, 20 puppies. And they'd be little bitty guys, they'd be 4 days old or some daggone thing. Forget that. Let's assume it's fully unoccupied. Western Colorado represents, without doubt, the best unoccupied wolf habitat in the world.
Wow.
Matter of fact, I think I could make the case that it's the best wolf habitat in the world, occupied or unoccupied. And you say, well, gee whiz, Mike, how is that the case? Well, here's how you can look at it. It has a very, very, Western Colorado presents gray wolves a very, very favorable prey biomass. And I said earlier, if human-caused mortality is low for gray wolf population dynamics are decided by food, prey biomass. Colorado supports a ridiculous number of deer and elk. About a long-term average for elk would be 200,000. A long-term average for deer would be 400,000. So there's this large numbers of deer and elk. Hold that thought. Then you wonder about patterns of land ownership. Is there federal public land that's managed for multiple use purposes against which wildlife, things like gray wolves, would receive reasonable consideration? Over 20 million acres of federal public lands in western Colorado. So let's compare those two aspects, prey and land ownership, to the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Greater Yellowstone ecosystem is the largest assemblage of conservation lands in the temperate world. The Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, let's be generous and say it includes 15 million acres of federal public lands or thereabouts. The heart and soul of the GYE, the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, would be Yellowstone National Park at 2.2 million acres. Okay, great. This wonderful patch of opportunity.
Right.
So with a favorable pattern of land ownership. And the GYE right now is a reference point for everybody, supports about 350 to 500 gray wolves. Cool.
Right.
That's a good number. That's cool. That's great. Okay. Favorable pattern of land ownership. The GYE probably supports 400,000 deer and elk.
Okay.
Let's say it's not quite half of what Western Colorado has. Western Colorado has probably twice as much deer and elk, twice as many deer and elk, more federal public lands. And we know the GYE, as the comparison, supports 350 to 500 gray wolves. Western Colorado can put those numbers on the board, if not more. It is this wonderful opportunity of land ownership and prey abundance that is ideally suited for gray wolves, and absent those 30 adults on the ground and a handful of puppies, it's wolfless. From the perspective of a restoration ecologist like myself, beyond the habitat models telling me unequivocally it's supremely suitable habitat, beyond that, its location in the continent really matters.
Okay.
Here's where that plays. Gray wolves can be found from northwestern Montana and northwestern Wyoming, Yellowstone, all the way north, unbroken into the high Arctic of Canada. This
right.
extensive population of gray wolves that go all the way high Arctic. And then if you crawl
right.
down into the border country of southwestern New Mexico and southeastern Arizona, you can bump into 300 Mexican gray wolves. That's good. They're there because they're largely fed by the Fish and Wildlife Service, but nonetheless, let's give the wolves the benefit of the doubt. You got 300 down there in the border country.
Yeah.
With 300 in the border country to the south, thousands going up to the high Arctic. And you got this great big gap in the middle.
Yeah.
The great big gap in the middle is western Colorado.
Interesting.
You can establish a population of gray wolves in western Colorado. That population will serve as the archstone connecting gray wolves from the high Arctic all the way to the Mexican border. Ed, there is no other place in the world where you can imagine completion of the restoration of a large, endangered, much maligned carnivore across a continent. That is restoration magic of the finest kind.
The missing piece of the puzzle.
Indeed.
Fantastic.
Indeed.
Let me ask you this. This will be my last question for you. What's the one thing you would want all Americans to know about wolf reintroductions and the benefit of having wild wolves thriving in the U.S.?
Oh,
and that's a hard one because so many Americans live in different
hard.
places.
As a matter of fact, I this Friday, my youngest daughter is a junior at Bozeman High School, and she's a member of the Human Rights Club. And I get to go visit with the Human Rights Club this Friday and speak about endangered species work and why does it matter, and the sixth great extinction crisis. But why does wolf restoration matter? Why? It's a dramatic illustration that we can right a wrong. We don't have to live in an impoverished world, impoverished from a biological perspective. We can restore imperiled species on purpose. We can celebrate the wondrous diversity of life that still surrounds us. We can celebrate it through active management of populations that occur on their own. We can celebrate it through purposeful reintroductions to restore populations that will come to persist on their own. It is a dramatic example that we can right a wrong. And there's no way, if you're willing to be objective, there's no way you can argue that it was right to decimate gray wolves. There's no math that you can assemble that would lead to that answer. It doesn't mean that you don't kill gray wolves on occasion. You can kill them because they're causing a problem. You can kill them because you want to hang the fur on the wall. But there's no math that would say needless killing is justified. Gray wolves got caught up in this embrace of manifest destiny. Mm-hmm. When white folks showed up from Europe so long ago, they set out across this great country to tame the wilderness. Mm-hmm. And they whipped Native Americans. They whipped American plains bison. They whipped gray wolves. They subdued the wild aspects of much of this country to make room for their European perspective. And we've been living with that ugly, violent history ever since. Okay, fine. If you're willing to embrace that as a reasonable portrayal of history, it doesn't have to be our future.
Right.
We can restore nature. Wolf reintroductions makes clear that even species that get people fired up, good and bad, even people that think gray wolves are angelic, or people that think gray wolves are devilish, we can still go forward and celebrate the power of restoration. We can right a wrong. That's the story. That's the punchline of wolf recovery.
Mike Phillips, thank you so much. That is fantastic. I really appreciate you being on the show. This has been a real honor for me. I could ask you more questions all day, but I do want to be respectful of your time. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's going to make a big difference to this season.
Ed, thank you. My honor, pal. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Nature's Secret Service is written and produced by me, Ed Newcomer, and is co-produced by the DHTV team here at California State University, Dominguez Hills. Follow us on social media and connect with us online at naturesecretservice.com.